Have you ever asked yourself, why do I try so hard and still feel stuck? You read the books, set the goals, wake up early, strive to do everything right. And yet, deep down, there's still a quiet voice telling you that you're not enough. The problem isn't that you lack ability or luck. The problem is that you're living under a mental program, one written by criticism, past failures, societal standards, and fears you've mistaken for truth. Most people live as if they are the outcome of a script they didn't write. But Stoicism teaches us you were not born to be a product of your environment. You were born to command it, and every day you are given the chance to rewrite that program, not through fleeting inspiration, but through small, deliberate actions repeated with intent. This isn't motivation. This is a way of living, a quiet ritual to reforge yourself from within. 1. Everything begins with the mental script you repeat each day. You may not notice it, but each morning as you wake up, a silent melody begins to play in your head. It's not a tune you chose. It's the unconscious voice, the repeated phrases from the past, the judgments you once heard and came to believe as truth. It might sound like, I'm not good enough, I'm always behind, everyone else is ahead, or I don't deserve this. These phrases don't always appear clearly. Sometimes they're just a heavy feeling when you glance at your schedule, a wave of laziness disguised as exhaustion, or a choice to delay when you should act. And all of it stems from one place, a mental script you've repeated long enough to mistake it for who you are. What's most frightening isn't the negativity itself, but the point where you can no longer tell which thoughts are truly yours and which were planted there. The human mind is fertile ground, but easily overrun. Anything repeated enough, praise or criticism, truth or error, can become part of your identity. And once it becomes identity, it no longer gets questioned. It becomes the default. That's how you can live for decades believing I'm not good enough, without ever pausing to ask, who planted that thought, and why do I still believe it? The Stoics called this false ownership, when you accept something not yours as if it were natural. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." He wasn't speaking of random color. He was speaking of programming. Each thought is a drop of ink, and if you let it fall in the same place each day, your soul will be stained in its tone. If you regularly think of failure, you won't just feel like a failure. You'll act like one. If you keep repeating that you have no worth, you won't even notice the opportunities before you, because your mind has already been trained to believe you don't deserve them. Not because it's true, but because it's been repeated too many times. The only way to escape the old script isn't to violently cut it off, but to rewrite it, bit by bit, line by line, with small daily habits. You don't need to proclaim yourself a new person. You just need to begin with a simple question. What am I repeating to myself each day? Is it building me up or breaking me down? Once you become aware of those invisible phrases, you can begin to challenge them, and then you can replace them with new ones, not hollow mantras like, I am the best, but deliberately chosen truths. I am learning to be disciplined. I am getting better each day. I'm not perfect, but I keep going. Repeating these phrases isn't brainwashing you into daydreaming. On the contrary, it's cleansing the corrupted code you've absorbed from society, from a culture that fears failure, from social media that traps you in endless comparison and lack. Choosing one phrase to repeat each morning is like choosing the key for the day's symphony, a tone that is deliberate, aware, and aligned. When you speak words that carry constructive power, you're reprogramming your nervous system. Your brain doesn't distinguish real from false the way logic does. It learns through repetition. The question isn't whether you're being programmed. The real question is, who's writing your code? You or the world? Look at a normal day. You wake up, unlock your phone, scroll through notifications, alarming news, curated posts, complaints, things that make you feel like you're falling behind. Then you carry that energy through your day, mistaking it for your own emotions. But in truth, it's the result of letting others write your mental script the moment your eyes open. And if you do that day after day, living in anxiety, doubt, and exhaustion stops being a mystery. It becomes predictable. Stoicism doesn't tell you to suppress emotions. It teaches you to observe them with reason. Not every emotion demands action. Not every thought deserves obedience. When you learn to step back from the stream of thoughts, you begin to see, oh, that's just an old script looping again. I can let it pass. And you begin to choose a new one to replace it. Not perfectly, just deliberately. Let repetition become a living ritual. Each morning, instead of letting the world continue the story in your mind, be the one who ends the sentence. And write a new one you choose, in your voice, at your rhythm. No need to shout, just stay awake enough to know this. You are ultimately responsible for the software running your mind. And that is the strongest spiritual power anyone can possess, not through inspiration, but through conscious repetition every single day. 2. Your living space is the mirror of your mind. There's a truth few people pay attention to. Each time you step into your space, be it your bedroom, your desk, or just the corner of your kitchen, your body isn't the only thing responding. Your mind is silently registering, interpreting, and reflecting back. A messy room isn't just a sign of laziness. It's an unconscious signal that something inside you is cluttered, overloaded, or neglected. And on the flip side, a clean, light-filled space doesn't just soothe the eyes. It tells your nervous system, here, things are under control. Here you are in command. Stoics deeply understood the link between environment and inner life. They didn't treat living space as incidental. On the contrary, they saw it as the ground where the mind takes root. Epictetus owned little, not from poverty, but because he knew external excess creates internal noise. Seneca warned that luxury can become a prison, not because wealth is wrong, but because dependence on the unnecessary erodes clarity and strength of mind. Your space is not just where you live. It's the physical expression of your inner world. If you want to understand someone's thoughts, don't ask. Look at the room they inhabit. Everything reveals the truth. Start with what's closest, your desk. Is it arranged with intention, or is it a dumping ground for things you don't know where else to put? A desk full of scattered papers, tangled cords, unrelated clutter, leftover food, or I'll get to it later, item signals more than disorganization. It signals delayed decisions in life, not just in cleaning. The human mind craves clarity, but if your surroundings scream chaos, it's hard to stay focused, calm, or aligned with long-term goals. This doesn't mean you have to be a minimalist monk or turn your home into a showroom. The deeper truth is this: your space should serve your vision, not betray it. If you want to be calm, strong, and lucid, your environment should reflect that, not through luxury, but through curation and intentional stillness. A notebook placed with care, a lamp casting soft light, a plant breathing life into a corner, a reading nook that invites silence, a drawer with no junk. These small elements create an energy field that makes you want to greet the day with presence. Remember, your living space isn't just physical. Your digital space is part of your mental environment too. A phone screen bursting with notifications, a social feed flooded with negativity, an inbox overflowing. Apps sprawled everywhere. These are invisible furnishings shaping your mind. If your desk is where you build results, your phone and laptop are where you absorb signals. The question is, what are you absorbing? Someone who knows what they want won't start their morning with soul-numbing headlines or keep apps that don't serve their vision. Digital discipline is a visible sign of spiritual discipline. Your space also includes the people around you, the conversations you repeat daily, the relationships you hold on to, even when they drain you, the meals shared with constant complainers, the advice you never asked for. All of it forms the mental soundtrack shaping your thoughts. Every relationship is part of your emotional architecture. You can't claim to be cultivating peace while spending time with people who sow confusion. This isn't avoidance, it's conscious choice. You have the right to guard access to your mental energy, and you owe no apology for that. Finally, understand this. Cleaning your space isn't about impressing others. It's a quiet, spiritual act. Every time you wipe a surface, fold something with care. Silence a pointless notification or reorganize your desk. You're not just moving objects. You're building a new structure within. You're telling your mind, we are reclaiming this space, and in doing so, we are reclaiming ourselves. 3. Gratitude is the antidote to scarcity. If there is one mental state quietly dominating modern life more than any other, it is the feeling of not enough. Not enough money, not enough time, not attractive enough, skilled enough, lucky enough, successful enough. This feeling doesn't always show in words. It appears in your eyes when you see someone moving ahead, in the sigh you let out while looking at all the things you've yet to achieve, in the quiet tension that rises when others have what you believe you can't reach. And the most dangerous part is this. If you don't learn how to regulate that state, it will gradually become the default setting for your entire life. The Stoics never treated this lightly. They didn't see gratitude as a soft feeling reserved for holidays or the blindly optimistic. To them, gratitude was a strategy for living, a discipline of emotion, a spiritual armor that shields you from the corrosion of endless desire. Seneca once wrote, "No one is poor who has enough, and enough comes not from wealth, but from clarity." That was not just a rational statement, but a wake-up call for anyone living in a spiral of imagined lack. Because the sense of not enough doesn't always arise from truth. It often grows out of comparison, out of forgetting what is already yours and focusing only on what's missing. Look at your day. From the moment you wake up, how many of your first minutes are spent just breathing, noticing that you're alive, healthy, under a roof, holding a phone, given another chance to begin again? How many times during the day do you pause to quietly say, "I'm grateful for this"? And how many times do you let your mind slip into default mode, scrolling, comparing lives, quietly concluding that yours is not interesting enough, not remarkable enough, not worth enough? If you're like most people, the answer might not be pleasant, but that's no shame. The real concern is whether you'll allow that feeling of lack to keep steering your choices. Gratitude is the only way to reclaim control. Not by pretending to be content, not with hollow positivity, but through deliberate action. You stop, observe the present, and choose one specific thing to appreciate. Not 3 great things, just one small thing. Warm light falling through a window, a simple meal that's enough. A moment where you stayed calm instead of losing your temper. A friend who still shows up. A peaceful night's sleep. A time you didn't give up, even when everything told you to. Practicing gratitude like this resets your inner system. You remind yourself, I don't need more to feel enough. I just need to look deeper into what's already here. The truth is, gratitude doesn't kill ambition, as many fear. It doesn't make you complacent, lazy, or trapped in your comfort zone. In fact, it's the solid ground from which to pursue your goals without losing your peace. When you know what you already have, you stop chasing success just to fill a void. You start building it as a natural extension of your strength. You act not because you need something to feel worthy, but because you want to give more from a place of inner fullness. You'll also notice that gratitude softens the inner voice of self-judgment. Instead of saying, "I'm not doing enough," you begin to see, "I'm showing up every day, and that matters." Instead of complaining, "I haven't achieved anything," you'll remember, "I've made it through things I once thought would break me." These shifts don't come from force. They come from habit, a few minutes a day, where you pause, write down, or whisper to yourself what you're thankful for. Slowly, you build a mind not swept away by what's missing, but anchored in what's whole. Gratitude, when practiced well, becomes your most powerful, quiet weapon. It doesn't shout, boast, or dazzle, but it makes you steadier, clearer, and more peaceful in a world that never stops racing. And that is why those who understand its strength don't wait to have everything before they're thankful. They give thanks while still on the path, and that is what lights their way forward, day by day. 4. The language you use with yourself is a form of programming. Few people realize this, but every sentence you speak, whether aloud or only in your mind, is a line of code being written into your mental operating system. And if you don't manage that language, it will eventually manage you. Because the mind doesn't just hear you, it learns from you. It stores your words as behavioral instructions. When you keep saying, "I always mess things up," "I'm not good at anything," "I'm just terrible," your brain won't argue with you. It will record, reinforce, and start shaping your thinking, reactions, and actions to match what you said. Not because it's true, but because you said it too many times. That's why the Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius, spent so much time journaling, not for others, but for themselves. His writings weren't grand or poetic. They were reminders, corrections, daily rewiring of his thoughts. That was his way of reprogramming himself with intentional language, because he understood that if he didn't speak the right words to himself, he would be pulled by the noise around him. This applies not only to a Roman emperor, but to you, today, when you wake up to hundreds of voices pouring in through screens, apps, social feeds, and unresolved memories. The real question isn't whether you talk to yourself. It's, what are you saying? Pause and notice the inner tone when you make a mistake, look in the mirror, or feel like giving up. Is it gentle or harsh? Does it encourage you or shrink you? Do you speak like a supportive friend or echo the voices that once criticized you? It's hard to build a strong life if what you repeat daily are phrases like, "I can't do this," "I always fail," "I don't deserve it." Language is the first tool that shapes emotion. It activates or suppresses dopamine. It fuels or flattens motivation. When you choose to say, "I'm learning to get better," instead of, "I suck at this," you're not just changing words. You're shifting your perception. You move from sentencing yourself to guiding yourself, from judgment to process. And if you stay consistent with this shift, your nervous system will slowly adapt. You don't need to believe it immediately. You just need to repeat it often and with intention. What matters is you don't need grand or unrealistic affirmations. You don't need to stand in front of a mirror yelling, "I'm the greatest," if that feels false. But you can absolutely say, "I'm making progress every day. I have the patience to keep going. I don't need perfection to be worthy. I won't quit over small mistakes." These aren't slogans for comfort. They're commands, maps to steer the mind toward the identity you're building. Say them enough, with presence and sincerity, and you'll see your beliefs update bit by bit. There's a deep reason why successful people tend to have precise and disciplined self-talk. They don't allow themselves to use language that belittles their efforts, not out of arrogance, but because they understand. Each sentence is a seed sown into their will. If you sow doubt, you'll harvest delay. If you sow self-blame, you'll harvest helplessness. But if you sow words of reason, courage, and forward motion, you'll reap inner resilience. Not because life gets easy, but because you've trained yourself to move through the hard without destroying yourself from within. And perhaps the most important truth is this: you are the person you will hear the most in your lifetime. Not your friends, not your family, not your co-workers. You are the only one who chooses what voice you'll live inside. The voice of shame or the voice of strength. So be deliberate with every word you speak within, because nothing shapes your identity faster than the words you use to name yourself. 5. Not every thought is yours. There is a quietly life-altering moment in the journey of spiritual growth. The moment you realize, not every thought that appears in your mind belongs to you. Some thoughts drift in like the wind and leave just as easily. Some inner voices feel like your own reflection, but in truth, they are echoes from the past, from others, from your environment, or from wounds you never learned to name. But if you don't learn to observe and distinguish them, you will quickly begin to believe that everything you think is true, and that can lead you far away from who you really are. Stoicism calls this the first step toward freedom, the ability to separate thought from self. Epictetus said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our judgment about them." In other words, suffering doesn't come from external reality, but from how your mind interprets, judges, and reacts to it. And most of those reactions weren't consciously chosen. They are the product of long-standing unconscious thoughts embedded in you. Maybe they came from the cold voice of a teacher who once humiliated you in class, from a rejection you never understood, from a family that demanded perfection, from a society where vulnerability is mistaken for failure. These experiences imprinted themselves on your mind and created a stream of automatic thinking you now call my personality. But that isn't entirely true. Because if you didn't create the thought, if you never questioned its truth, if you never chose to keep it, then perhaps it was never really yours. It's just residing in your mind, like an uninvited guest who's stayed so long you mistake them for the host. This is why so many people live in fear, in a constant sense of not being enough or in doubt about their own worth, without knowing why. They don't realize they're making decisions, forming habits, and shaping their entire life based on scripts that weren't written by them. The Stoic practice here is not about rejecting every negative thought. It's about learning to step back and let it pass like a cloud drifting across the sky. No judgment, no identification, no immediate reaction. When a thought like, "I'm a failure," arises, the Stoic doesn't rush to argue or overwrite it with a fake positive affirmation. They pause and ask, "Where did this come from? Is it true? Does it serve my growth? If not, I can let it pass." Creating that space between you and the thought is where freedom begins. That's the moment you stop living by reflex and start living by choice. In practice, this separation can be trained through very simple actions. Write down the thoughts weighing on you. Read them as if written by someone else. Ask each one, "Is this true? Who taught me this? Do I want to keep carrying it?" Just a few repetitions of this, and you'll begin to see the old patterns, the unconscious loops, and you'll have the chance to rewrite them in your own voice. And you'll realize too, you can't stop negative thoughts from showing up, just like you can't stop clouds from passing through the sky. But you can choose not to build your house under that rain. You can choose not to camp out, not to build a life around a belief you never agreed to. You can choose to keep walking, even while those thoughts linger behind, no longer driving, no longer defining who you are. Because in the end, growth doesn't come from thinking positively all the time. It comes from recognizing that a thought is just a thought, and you are the one who decides what to believe and how to live. And that capacity, when trained consistently, becomes a quiet strength that frees you from any circumstance. 6. Move the body to free the mind. There are times when your mind feels foggy, your emotions stuck, your willpower drained, and you think what you need is deeper thought, more analysis, or better reasoning to climb out. But the more you sit with it, the more you spiral into circular thinking and feel directionless. Because the problem isn't in the mind, it's in the body. And sometimes what you truly need is not a solution, but motion. Your body is not separate from your mind. It is the tangible extension of your inner life. Everything you feel, anxiety, fatigue, emptiness, tension, shows up in the body, in your posture, your breath, your pulse, your muscle tone. And the remarkable thing is, the opposite is also true. When you deliberately change your physical state, even slightly, your mind begins to respond. A few slow steps, a conscious stretch, a deep breath. Any of these can open a path through mental stagnation. The Stoics understood this well. They didn't train their bodies for appearance, but to forge discipline and presence in the spirit. Cleanthes, a renowned Stoic, carried water through the night to fund his studies by day. For him, labor wasn't just survival, it was a way to keep the mind from dullness, to let the body anchor his resolve. Marcus Aurelius also stressed, when the body is sluggish, the spirit is dragged down. He never separated physical care from spiritual cultivation. In reality, the feeling of being stuck in your head often follows hours of stillness. You sit locked at your desk, eyes glued to a screen, mind racing with thoughts, while the body stays inert. That creates a kind of mental congestion that only movement can clear. You don't need to run 5 miles or lift weights. Just stand up, walk for 10 minutes, stretch, step outside for fresh air, and it will feel like hitting the reset button. Movement is how the body reminds the mind. We're alive and we're still in control. Every step grounds you in the present. Every deep breath reminds you that nothing is as urgent as it seems. And the beauty is, these small movements don't just ease your mind, they also activate vital systems. Dopamine rises, cortisol falls, circulation improves, and your focus slowly returns. When you feel stuck, creatively, emotionally, or motivationally, don't sit there and think harder. Get up and move. Let the body lead when the mind is tired. Let each step affirm that you're not trapped, you're moving, you're alive, and you're ready to walk out of the fog. Not by force of will, but through the quiet, physical act of motion, small but powerful enough to awaken everything within you. 7. Discipline is loyalty to your highest self. In a world that glorifies comfort, discipline is often misunderstood. People think discipline is about force, restriction, or sacrificing joy to fit into a rigid mold. They assume a disciplined life is dry, joyless, and void of freedom, as if you're constantly denying yourself the pleasures of living. But that view is shallow. True discipline is not punishment. It is the quiet act of loyalty, not to others, but to the highest version of yourself, the version you once envisioned, once hoped to become, but so often abandoned for short-term temptations. Discipline is how you say to yourself, I haven't forgotten who I'm trying to become. When you choose not to sleep in, it's not because you hate rest, but because you value the clarity of a purposeful morning. When you eat mindfully, it's not because you resent fast food, but because you respect the body that will carry you through the long road ahead. When you work without being pushed, it's not because you're obsessed with results, but because you've decided not to drift through life on autopilot. Every act of discipline is a quiet statement that you take your future seriously enough, that you respect your dream enough not to harm it with careless choices. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do what is right, the rest doesn't matter." For him, discipline didn't come from pressure. It came from a solid foundation of values. When you know what's right, you don't need motivation. You just need to remind yourself what truly matters. And this is the core of Stoic discipline. Act not from inspiration, but from direction. Don't follow the mood, follow the compass. Don't wait for emotions to align. Act in a way that brings emotions into alignment with what's right. Most people long for stability, lasting health, meaningful work, a calm mind, healthy relationships. But they build these on fleeting emotions. Emotions that shift constantly, demand endlessly, and often contradict themselves. One day they feel excited, the next they feel discouraged. One day they're full of resolve, the next they delay. If you live like that, nothing stays long enough to grow. Discipline is the one force strong enough to resist that conflict, firm enough to keep you with what's right, even when it no longer feels right. And the paradox is, the more disciplined your life becomes, the freer you feel. Not freedom to do anything you want, but the freedom to live in alignment with the version of you that you truly respect. You begin to trust yourself, to believe that when you say, I will do this, you actually will. To believe that when you make a promise to yourself, you'll keep it. That trust doesn't come from talk. It comes from small actions done when no one is watching. Discipline doesn't require perfection. It only asks for consistency. And that consistency over time builds a self you no longer doubt. Because in the end, discipline is not the denial of joy. It is the silent promise you make to yourself. I will not live beneath the best version I'm capable of becoming. I don't need to be perfect, but I must be loyal. Loyal to my ideals, to the values I stand for, to the legacy I want to leave. And from that loyalty, a life with direction, depth, and real freedom begins to take shape. I don't believe that discipline, gratitude, or thought awareness is anything lofty. To me, they're simply a way of living, something you choose each day in the smallest actions no one else sees. It's waking up on time even after a late night, folding the blanket even when no one checks, walking off a heavy feeling with slow steps, looking in the mirror and speaking words kind enough to keep going. No one can do that for you, and no one needs to witness it for it to matter. I believe that if each day you patiently re-choose your mindset, your environment, your actions, then little by little, you'll build a life you can trust, not for others, but for yourself. And to me, that is real strength, a quiet mind, steady from within. If this message resonates with the season of life you're in, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future content. Because sometimes, a new life doesn't begin with a grand decision, but with the way you choose to speak to yourself on an ordinary morning. See you in the next video.